You don't expect that face in your car in a cornfield. All right. Let's learn about this Serbian terrorist as a young man.
So I didn't, as I said to Fritz, I didn't read the notes today. I didn't read them yesterday, but hopefully everything will be fine.
It's fine.
It'll be fine.
No, he's drunk.
Yeah.
It's good.
I am
He's drunk already.
That's
Oh,
true.
nice.
I had a bottle of wine.
Nice. I took a bunch of weed tinctures, so I'm high.
I had a bottle.
nice.
I had this. What's the name of the wine?
Yes. And it's pretty good, I think.
It's okay.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean,
fine.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yes, which is all I know how to say about wine. There's good and there's bad.
I mean, I had yes, it got me drunk, which was the point.
So good. All right.
And my head doesn't hurt, which is also a good thing.
Well, wait till tomorrow.
No, I don't. I have a feeling that it won't hurt.
Yes, that's called drunkenness. Nothing
No,
hurts.
I know when I'm drunk and I'm
that it will
I will
hurt.
be fucked
Okay.
tomorrow. I know.
Okay, all right. Didn't mean to insult
when
your
you make,
experience here.
when you make a jug of cocktails and nobody,
Okay,
not
fair
enough
enough.
people come, and then you start tapping into it and don't remember how you got home, but you do know that it was 7 a.m. at least.
Yeah.
Or when you drink 7 to 10 Yugoslav beers. That's like popular beer in Czech is same as Yugoslav the type, but it's much better.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
But
It
I don't
is.
know about Slovak beers, for example.
Yeah, me neither. From my readings, Ustashas really don't like Czech people. They say that Czechoslovakia is like Yugoslavia and that Czechs are basically Serbs.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Which kind of
How?
doesn't really add up
What
because
way?
it should kind of go the other way, right? I don't know.
In what way could they?
How are they Serbian?
Yeah.
Because they're oppressing the poor Slovaks.
There's more of them than Slovaks. I guess that's the.
Okay. They're like the dominant ethnic power center in Czechoslovakia.
Except when Slovaks wanted to separate, they were like, "Okay, fine,
That's
whatever."
fine. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Which is not very Serbian.
Are you guys still here? Yeah, go. Oh, I should introduce the show. Welcome to The Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Is one of us is anyway. We're back to finish the youth of Nikola Kavaja, right? This is his the last of his formative years as far as the podcast goes.
Yes.
All
So
right.
most of the head trauma is now finished, I would say.
Okay.
Now we'll see the results of it.
Yeah.
And,
I was gonna ask. I was like, who is Nikola Kavaja? How much head trauma will he get before he becomes a terrorist?
Oh no, we got it all. Yeah.
That's episode 1. Now we'll see
Yeah.
the beginnings of his terrorist career.
Uh-huh.
And
So we move from trauma input to trauma output.
yes. As far as I'm like the as much as I read his autobiography, I didn't see any head trauma after that. But who knows? Maybe in the
Who
next
knows?
episode we'll have some more. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can always hope.
Now he incurs his brain damage from liquor abuse.
There we go.
Well, that's also kind of head trauma, I
Yes.
guess. But Father Kavaja, for example, didn't complain about head trauma. I think when he was imprisoned in America. I think
Right. Yeah.
so. It's a different style of imprisoning people, I would say.
Well, I think that depends. You know.
Yes. I mean, some of these places where Kavaja showed up, they would just straight up, instead of saying, "Hey, you bastard," they would just hit him with their gun into his head. Like that was kind of
There's some places in the States like that too. But yeah.
yeah.
But let's all right, so where we left him off, I think in Salzburg after this insane attempt to escape. It took 2 tries and a lot of prison time and a lot of beatings. Finally gets out with a Slovakian friend, and he's on his way to Salzburg. Because he's a fan of Mozart.
Mozart will actually be a part of this story.
Of course. What else are you going to do in Salzburg?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Very soon I will talk about that. But actually, he was also like as our patrons will know in the reenactment of an interview we'll do with Nikola Kavaja in our Patreon episode.
I think we did it.
While he was oh yes, we already did it. Yeah. Yeah. So in our last week Patreon episode, if you listen to it, you would know that while the interview was going on, there was soft classical music in the background in Kavaja's flat.
Yeah, that's right. Classy dude.
Yes.
You can tell just by looking at him. He's a fan of, les études.
He's like the guys from the action movies that we watched, right?
Oh my God, he is.
He's like brutish, like Slavic barbarians that also, appreciate high culture.
Yes. Yeah. What was his name in the crap? We saw so many.
I was just trying to think of it. Like
he's a Goran, I guess, or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he is Goran. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is when Kavaja officially forms the Brown Hats, and
yes. So Nikola Kavaja was born in 1933, and now we are in 1957. He finally managed to escape New Yugoslavia, which, by the way, was an actual term that was used. In post-war Yugoslav society, it was called New Yugoslavia, as opposed to old one, the monarchist one. So it was even used in like official ways, like the kind of the news agency, the Yugoslav Reuters or whatever you call it, is called TANJUG, which is an acronym for the Telegraphic Agency of New Yugoslavia. So we didn't make
also Mirko Markovic, who we talked about in the beginning of this arc, published a book called The Struggle in America for New Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Right before he actually got sent to Goli Otok.
Right. Yeah, he also
because that book came out in 1947. But
that's right.
He got rehabilitated.
You would think if a news service wanted to emphasize the newness of it, they wouldn't put the word telegraph in the title of it. No?
Well, okay, it was like
the 40s.
1943 when they founded the agency.
I mean,
the telegraph was still cutting edge.
How about radio? You had radio.
I mean, it was like a partisan agency originally in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Kavaja managed to escape New Yugoslavia after, he started escaping in 1953. In 1957, he actually managed to reach Austria and Salzburg in particular. So he's now 24 years old, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So still very young. So why is he in Salzburg? Well, because Salzburg has like a bunch of these camps for refugees. And it's a thing that, I think has its origins in the post-war years, although it's 1957. You still have a bunch of these camps for Eastern Europeans, a lot of Yugoslavs, but not only Yugoslavs, like a lot of Polish people there as well. And some of them are there since the end of the Second World War still.
Yeah.
And then a lot of new ones joined them. And so Kavaja will spend next a few, I think 4 years in Salzburg before moving to United States. Mostly socializing in these camps around Salzburg. So there is a few of them around town, on the edges of town, but they're all, I won't get into the details of the camps and so on, but he's mostly they're on walking distance from each other. So he's kind of walking around and from the center of the city to these camps and visiting his friends that he made all around Salzburg. Most of them not all of them, but most of them who were various Eastern Europeans who lived in these camps.
Right. And we know from the Drašković episode as well that, these places were places of networking, of, meeting people, planning to where you're going to move next, where you're going to go after you get out of this camp. They even had their little sports teams and stuff.
Exactly, yes. So remember, Kavaja met a friend, a Slovenian friend called Viktor, that he escaped from the prison, from the train while being transferred to the Goli Otok camp. They escaped together to Austria. So Viktor, the Slovenian, is still there, and he's basically his best buddy and will continue to be the whole time that he lives in Salzburg. they're very close, and he loves him very much, and like trusts him, like which is interesting because now he's like in a city which is full of Serbs and also full of like Chetniks and very nationalist Serbs, but still the guy that he trusts the most is this Slovenian guy. And he will be now kind of really recruited for the cause here in Salzburg. This is why it's very important. So he meets like again like Kavaja writes like very extensively. The book has 600 pages, and he writes about his recollection is pretty good, unless maybe he's making things up. I don't know, but like he mentions like hundreds and hundreds of people. So I skip most 99.9% of these people, but there are a few important people that he meets while in Salzburg.
All right.
So an important person, one of the most important people that he met there, who he saw as a kind of his commanding officer or something like this. He does refer to him as such. Okay. He's a former Chetnik from Serbia called Predrag Radojković, also known as Šića, who was a colonel. Šića was a colonel in the Yugoslav monarchist army, and then he was a Chetnik during the Second World War. And apparently, at least according to Kavaja, he stayed in Yugoslavia post-war and kind of was an outlaw for a few years, and only left the socialist Yugoslavia in 1948. Okay. Being an outlaw until that year, at least according to Kavaja. So he's the basically Kavaja's handler. Like when we talked about Father Kajević escaping Yugoslavia in 1963, Father Kajević went to Trieste, and then he met a kind of shady, interesting guy there, a Serbian guy called Vurdelja, if you remember, who was like the president of the Serbian church organization there, which was very shady, very very wealthy. The organization owned like ocean liners, and Vurdelja was basically an American guy, which Father Kajević told us, because when he died, his widow got like an apartment which was on the premises of an American military base in Italy, and basically Vurdelja worked for CIA. So this Colonel Šića is the same kind of character. Like Vurdelja, he's connected to the local police. Like he basically, he interrogates the new immigrants from Yugoslavia and then sends this information to the local police. But I'm
just a fan of authority.
Yes.
That's just me.
And he helps them as well. He gives them all the information they need. They give them documents and so on. But he also works for other people, as we'll learn soon. He's similar to the Father Kajević handler from Trieste in the sense that he also has his Chetnik bodyguards around him, like who take care of him and protect him, and so on. And so when both Kavaja and Victor first came to Salzburg, they met this guy Šića, the Colonel Šića, and who was an older guy, of course, and he kind of organized the whole thing for them. He was happy to see them, especially because it was a good propaganda thing for, the anti-Titoist cause, because they were like officers, they had uniforms and so on. Yep. So he organized everything for them at the beginning. So he organized like a press conference for them, and he insisted that they should show up in their uniforms and talk, against Tito and so on. And there were many journalists there, who asked questions and so on. And then immediately after that, they went to the police and gave their statements there. Who they are, why are they there, and they were kind of interrogated, but in a very friendly way, because all the cops were Colonel Šića's friends. So not only that, I think in the last episode we were mentioning how Kavaja's family was colonized, because that's the term that was used in northern Serbia after the Second World War. And then Fritz pointed out how many of these places were German-populated places in Serbia and Yugoslavia, villages and so on. But the Volksdeutsch population was kicked out after the end of the Second World War. And I said that some of these people will reappear, if you remember. Some of these Volksdeutsch people.
Ooh, I've been waiting.
This is when they reappear. And so one of the police inspectors that interrogates in a very friendly way Kavaja and his Slovenian friend Victor in this Salzburg police station immediately after the press conference is a guy who's from Serbia, like from Vojvodina, from Vrbas. And he's like a Volksdeutsch German from there, who's now an Austrian cop and who speaks like fluent Serbian. And Kavaja says that he speaks better Serbian than he does.
I can believe that. Yeah.
Yes. And so this guy, he doesn't mention that this guy was a Nazi, but I'm pretty sure this guy was a Nazi.
I mean,
there's a pretty strong chance. Collaboration rates, among men of the Volksdeutsch population, especially in Vojvodina, was very high. I mean, they had their whole Prince.
It was like close to universal,
division,
right? Yeah,
yeah, very much so. I mean, it was a very popular thing.
There were also like German communists and partisans from that area that kind of the Titoists later wanted to forget about and were kind of pretending that many of them were Hungarian because it was embarrassing that you have all of these German partisans and even some people's heroes, like people who were declared to be people's heroes in Yugoslavia after the war. So I think there were 4 or 5 people's heroes like in Yugoslavia who were Germans. And there was a whole partisan detachment of Germans. Yes, but many of them were collaborationists, and I bet this cop was one of them.
Well, especially people that would later go on, or
to be cops,
continue to be
Austria.
Things like cops in Austria.
Yes.
Probably a pretty good chance that.
Yes, and especially because Kavaja doesn't say anything about what he did during the war, and I'm sure he asked him.
Yeah. Pretty much this, really.
Yes.
Just a little bit more electroshock.
So they had to be held in this prison for a few weeks. This was like a formality, and they said like after the pretty horrible experience they had in some of these prisons in Yugoslavia, they were like, fine, we have these like friendly cops holding us in prison for a few weeks, no problem. And then after a few days, this German from Serbia cop, probably Nazi, told them that there is some interest for them coming from the Austrian and American army in Austria, and that some of their people will come to interrogate them. And a few days later, they did show up. And again, one of these Austrian officers was a guy, again, from a Volksdeutsch guy from Serbia. I think this time from Zemun, I think. Okay. Again, speaking Serbian perfectly and probably a former Nazi. So Kavaja was offering lots of information to them, but at some point he was kind of tired. And he said, okay, let's continue. Like, when I get my political asylum, let's continue this conversation. But like, as long as I'm a prisoner, even if it's a formality, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And they were like, fine, no problem. So a few days later, they got political asylum in Austria. So they were fine to be there. And when they were, given this asylum and let go out of prison, one of these German Serbian Nazi cops was there, and he said like, well, you should, now what we expect of you is to cooperate with the authorities here. And you should tell us information about, people who are suspect somehow in the Yugoslav community in these camps and so on. And
Kavaja was like, suspicious than Kavaja? More suspicious than the guy that grenaded his way out and tried
he
to
killed
assassinate.
Communists, so he was not suspicious.
Right.
Yes. Suspicious means people who work for the Tito.
Yeah. People who like sharing.
Yes. I mean, everything that Kavaja did basically earned him like a green card later on.
Yeah.
As you will see.
There's a lot of paths to citizenship. They don't tell you that one on the webpage, but there it is.
Yes. Yeah. So they are giving this like asylum, and this cop tells them this, and so you should work for us. And Kavaja is like, well, I want to, but only if it's for the cause of anti-communism.
They laugh.
The German Serbian Nazi cop is like, oh yeah, of course, that's all we want from you. So they have an agreement, and And then the cop says, like, let's go now to a restaurant across the street. And they go all together there with the cops. And there it's, his handler there, basically Colonel Shicha there, waiting for him. So they have a nice dinner. But he introduces to another guy. You know who the guy is?
Is it a Dulles brother?
No. But it's actual Vurdelja, the guy from Trieste who would later be the first contact that Father Kavaja had when he escaped Yugoslavia in '63. The very wealthy guy, probably working for the CIA.
Yeah, he had the big fancy house by the church or something, right, in Trieste.
Kind of a mobster vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's now in Salzburg. He came from Trieste. So remember, this is like 6 years before Father Kavaja, had his journey.
Okay.
And he meets, Kavaja. He's very interested to meet him in this restaurant, and he basically kind of spontaneously starts interrogating him there. And Kavaja is like, okay, listen, I was interrogated now for like years, basically. So, like, can we just have a dinner or something? Like, I don't want to answer all of these questions. So it's kind of an awkward situation there.
Mm-hmm.
And the dinner ends, and then Colonel Shicha tells, Kavaja, like, well, Vurdelja, he's a great man. He used to be a cop in monarchist Yugoslavia. He did a lot for our community. He's an anti-communist and so on. So he's like a big deal there. Like in the, and he even maybe, was probably deliberately came to Salzburg to meet Kavaja.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another important person that Kavaja meets in Salzburg is a very interesting Russian guy who's called, according to Kavaja, he is called Georgia Ribalko Gurmaisky. So we can call him Ribalko. And so he's a Russian guy who's allegedly a Cossack, and he was a white Russian during the revolution there.
Delicious.
Yeah, and he comes from this kind of military family from Russia. Obviously, he's a Cossack. He claims everyone was like an anti-communist in his family. Although there is he says there was one guy, some Pavel Ribalko, who kind of became a Bolshevik, and you actually have a Wikipedia article about this relative of his called Pavel Ribalko, who was
the black sheep,
a Red Army guy. So they also, it's kind of unclear why they meet him, but he's also one of these very well-connected people in Salzburg who's like trying to help them. But Ribalko is kind of Kavaja is very annoyed by him. At first, he hates him, and he actually tells him that he hates him. Because Ribalko is a very old guy. Now he's basically in his 80s, or almost in his 80s, and he's kind of a nihilist, kind of almost like a trickster character, as Kavaja portrays him. Very kind of cynical. So he talks with Victor and Kavaja, and they can understand him. Like he is an anti-communist, but he is more a nihilist now than he is anything else. And he kind of makes fun of them. He has very kind of black humor. They never know what to expect of him when he talks to them. And he's very harsh. Like, he makes fun of them. So Kavaja is very annoyed how he treats his Slovenian friend Victor. Because Victor, used to be an officer in the Yugoslav monarchist army, and then was captured by the Germans during the war, and then came back, and then was imprisoned in socialist Yugoslavia, and then escaped, and so on. So Victor tells him, like, well, you're an idiot for coming back there. You're just a fool. And then, Victor tells him, like, he has a wife that lives somewhere in Germany. He would like to get in touch with her. They have a child. And Victor tells him, like, well, you better not do that. She probably found some other guy. She doesn't want to know anything about you. Didn't see her in years.
Downer.
Like, yeah. So the Kavaja is getting very angry, and he's like starts yelling at this Ribalko Russian guy and tells him that he's an asshole and so on. Kind of storms out of his place. But later on, Ribalko would grew on him, and although he hated him very much, but he was also kind of intrigued by him. He didn't know what is this guy about. And then from Colonel Shicha, he learned that Colonel Shicha's opinion was that this is like a great man. He's a very good man, and you should kind of understand why you have this opinion of him. But he's actually very good. And he learned from Colonel Shicha that Ribalko was actually in the Yugoslav monarchist army as well. And by the way, Ribalko also is one of these people who speaks Serbian better than Kavaja. which he says. He speaks like Serbian, like he's from Serbia, and he has a Serbian wife called Ana.
So presumably he was one of these. I mean, one of the white Russian officers that probably settled in Yugoslavia, because we talked way back in the Weird Orthodox Churches episode that they had their own kind of training base, paramilitary base in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia.
Yes, he was for sure one of them. Although now he's kind of, he has this anti-communist background, but he's now in this kind of post-whatever, the fuck kind of phase. He doesn't care. And Kavaja is annoyed by this.
Sure. He sounds like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
Okay.
Your wife probably left you. We're all gonna die.
Yeah, yes. That's his attitude, yes.
Yeah.
He even, at some point, Kavaja heard something that he said that he kind of liked, and he saw because Ribalko was also a colonel in the Yugoslav army, and he said, Kavaja, because that particular moment, although he kind of hated him and said to his face that he's a bum, basically, this Ribalko. And Ribalko doesn't get mad, he's like, okay, whatever.
I suck.
Yeah. But at this point, Kavaja kind of heard something from him that he liked, and he saw, the old Russian or whatever warrior in him or whatever. God, okay. And he addressed him as like Colonel, sir, something like this, which is, in Serbo-Croatian, it's pukovniče. And Ribalko told him, like, don't call me pukovniče, like, call me pokojniče, which means like the departed. And
because he's so depressing.
I'm dead already, I'm not a colonel, I'm a departed person.
He's Eeyore.
And
I mean, I guess Eeyore hasn't been on the losing side of several wars. I mean,
you don't know that.
Yes,
you don't know his politics.
This guy is on the losing end of the Russian Revolution. Goes to, regather his forces only to lose again and end up in some fucking shitty refugee camp in Austria.
At 80 years old.
At 80 years old.
So what? You've read every Winnie the Pooh book? You know that for a fact?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Colonel Šića, you can see that he's kind of the guy who recruits, so not the Russian guy, the Serbian guy, the old Chetnik guy. Who kind of recruits Kavaja into this the anti-communist cause, because he's the one who in this book kind of introduces the narrative of how Yugoslavia was a anti-Serbian conspiracy, and then all Serbs should always be against Yugoslavia and so on.
Oh, okay.
Before that, Kavaja doesn't really mention anything like this, and I think that the anti-communist officers that he was in contact with while in Yugoslavia were pro-Yugoslav, They were not. They were like just monarchist and anti-communist, but for Yugoslavia.
So this marks Kavaja's like the beginning of his shift into outright Serbian nationalism, as opposed to just anti-communism in general.
A kind of exclusionary Serbian nationalism, because there is this kind of Serbian nationalism that was compatible with also being a pro-Yugoslav.
Oh, right. We've talked about that.
But this is like this more kind of Serbian national defense, and SOPO in particular, kind of brand of nationalism that says that Yugoslavia, any kind of Yugoslavia, be that a monarchist or a communist, is basically an anti-Serbian Croatian conspiracy against the Serbs.
Right.
So quickly he figures out, that Šića, the Colonel Šića, is kind of the main guy in these camps for, organizing Serbs and so on. And he becomes very close to him. But Ribalko, the white Russian guy, who kind of, you can't kind of escape the attitude, like the impression that he sees Kavaja as a kind of an idiot that he kind of likes, let's say, becomes almost kind of a father figure to Kavaja, and he doesn't like, although, Kavaja doesn't like Ribalko at this point, Ribalko has a protective kind of role. And Ribalko doesn't like Kavaja hanging out with Colonel Šića there. And although he's friends with him, like a good friend, and he doesn't like that. And when Ribalko talks to Kavaja, he says, well, did Šića tell you like for how many foreign intelligence agencies he works for? Like, did he tell you that he works for the CIA? And Kavaja is like, well, he didn't tell me that, but that's not a problem. As long as it's for an anti-communist cause, like, it's okay by me.
He's perfect. He's perfect.
Yes.
Get him into Bloodstone immediately.
Yes. So there are other characters here that he meets. There's a whole group of like Montenegrin, like kind of younger people who, I mean, kind of Kavaja's age, I guess, who were not, involved personally in the Second World War. So they were not Chetniks or anything like this. But he calls them like students, something like this. Although I think they're kind of past that age. But which is kind of funny because in Yugoslavia, especially in the like 50s and 60s and 70s, there was this whole kind of idea of Montenegrins being students for decades in these university centers in Yugoslavia. Like I know a friend who's from Zagreb. He's like 80 years old now, but he told me like when he was talking about he was like a 68er and so on. And he said, like, there was this whole group of, like, Montenegrins in Zagreb. Those people, they were students for 30 years. You wouldn't believe that. So I think when Kavaja says Montenegrin students, I have this kind of...
Yeah.
it is possible.
Yes. So he becomes also friends of these people, especially one guy called Veselin. And he's also kind of interesting because Veselin is like he has a younger brother who's one of these Montenegrin students there, who's like a very pro-Chetnik guy. And they come from a Chetnik family from Montenegro, like a Serbian Chetnik family from Montenegro. But, Kavaja, he befriends this Veselin and he hangs out with him. But then with Veselin, he sounds like a very, we mentioned that in 48 there was this split between Tito and Stalin. And so the people who were kind of pro-Soviet were accused of, being Stalinist and supporting this Soviet line and so on. And Veselin sounds like that. And we also know that he was at the Goli Otok concentration camp, which was made for these pro-Soviet people. And and they have this conversation, and Veselin comes from a Chetnik family, and he has this very pro-Chetnik younger brother there. But he's saying very pro-Soviet things, and Kavaja is like, well, are you like one of these pro-informed bureau, like pro-Soviet people? And he says, yes, I am. And like... and I'm not even a communist, I come from a Chetnik family, but the Chetniks were betrayed, and not by the Soviets, they were betrayed by the English, the fucking English. I hate them.
Okay.
And like, and we should, the West is like horrible. We should align ourselves with, the Russia, and Stalin is okay. I'm not a communist, but communism will pass, but nation is eternal, and we have a close national connection with Russia, and we should like stick with them, something like this. And also, Tito is a fascist, and we should like destroy his regime because it's a fascist regime. And Kavaja is like, well, what are you talking about? Well, how is Tito a fascist? Like, I don't understand. He says like, yes, he is. Like the way he treated me, and the Goli Otok, like he's a fucking fascist, and so on. So
Kavaja was like, well, those cops are fascists, and they seem like pretty nice guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But also, Kavaja's family were like Stalin supporters, supposedly, right?
Yeah,
like, I mean, they were like
they were partisans and communists who were like pro-Soviet because I guess maybe they were not clever enough to figure out they shouldn't be at some point because everyone was until that point, or maybe they were just very idealistic. I don't know, but. I mean, this is very interesting because this guy Veselin is a kind of a pro-Soviet Chetnik, basically like a pro-Stalin Chetnik, and he has this. I mean, it's very national Bolshevik kind of vibes there.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Yeah,
wonder he licks up with the pro-Stalin Ustasha that were running around Germany.
Yeah.
Around
I think we'll have some of that later on in some of the episodes. Yeah. So we learned that Colonel Šića, like this ideology that he has, anti-Yugoslav one, is not coincidental. He actually is the secretary for the Serbian National Defense in Austria.
Oh, okay.
So he's like the second guy in the organization in Austria. And Šića recruits, while in Salzburg, he recruits Kavaja for the Serbian National Defense in November of 1957.
Quickly for the listeners, if y'all are just getting here, we did a few episodes on Serbian national defense. I think like 4 of them. Just a few eps back. Yeah.
Yes. And this is interesting because, we kind of, this arc, which is about Serbian and Croatian terrorists, the Serbian part of it, one of my entry points to the story was talking about the national defense and Serbian national defense and this whole history.
Right.
And trying to connect it because it's a very long history. But I kind of realized that there is a connection, between the Black Hand and Sarajevo assassination and all of this to what we're talking about today. And that's very interesting because, in this November 1957 in Salzburg, when this former Chetnik, who is now the secretary of the Serbian National Defense for Austria, recruits Kavaja for the organization, when he recruits him, he tells him, our organization was started in 1908. That's when we were founded. And he tells him, we also had a big role in the Sarajevo assassination of 1914. So this is like the speech that he gives him. Yeah,
can't get away from the Black Hand here.
No. There will be more Black Hand in this episode. Yeah,
that's just for everybody out there. That's episodes 136 all the way to 139. If you want to check them out.
Yes. So kind of parallel or analogous to what we talked about in the previous episode with Kavaja. He now, being recruited by this new guy, he's being given tasks to do. We remember in the first episode while he still was in Yugoslavia, it was stealing documents from a military base. Then it was like dropping flyers from a plane. Then it was assassinating the commander of a base. Didn't work out. Yes,
he did steal the documents and he did dump the flyers. Yes. It would have been funny if he accidentally dumped the documents, but
yes. So one of the first assignments that he had was to keep an eye on a suspicious guy. There was a suspicious guy. There was always suspicious guys in these camps. There were like people who were suspected of being like Tito agents, So there was this guy who was kind of an asshole. No one liked him, and he asked too many questions, and everyone was like very suspicious of him.
Okay.
Kavaja was task was to start a relationship with this guy, but he was not supposed to be the one who instigates the relationship. He was supposed to wait for the other guy to start talking to him, which happened eventually. And so this is like I mentioned in the last episode, how I think Kavaja is a bit insecure about his last name and people thinking that he's not Serbian and so on. So
Albanian.
Yes. So he puts into this guy's mouth, this asshole who is probably a Titoist agent, these sentences like, well, Kavaja, but you're not a real Serb. No, like, are you Serbian? Like that last name, like it sounds weird. Like what's that about? And so he annoys Kavaja very much, And then he's supposed to follow him around, which he does, and then he sees him. This is also an interesting thing because he follows this guy around Salzburg, and then he sees him meeting another guy, and that guy has like a very particular physiognomy. He says, like he has a particular face, and he says it can only be a face and like a physiognomy either of a Montenegrin guy or an Albanian.
Okay,
which is very kind of interesting from him because he doesn't like Albanians supposedly, and he's a Montenegrin Serb, and then he kind of says, "Well, these people look the same."
Yes.
So he calls, Colonel Šića and tells like, he's talking to a fucking Albanian or something like this. He decides this guy's Albanian.
All right.
And so Šića comes there. So they split. Šića starts following the other guy, the Serbian guy, I guess, and Kavaja is following, the alleged Albanian guy through Salzburg. And then he eventually tracks him down to like a jewelry shop, which this guy enters, and Kavaja is waiting in front. Nothing happens. This guy is not getting out. So Kavaja gets like impatient. So he enters the shop and he sees the guy and he stands next to him. And then kind of he says that like he looked at him and Kavaja told to the Albanian guy something like, "Do you need an interpreter? It looks like you need an interpreter," something like this.
Okay.
And the other guy gets nervous and attacks Kavaja. So like I don't know why. Supposedly maybe because in Kavaja's mind, he was a Titoist, state security agent who kind of knew who Kavaja was, maybe, well, I don't know why. But there is a huge fight between them. So the Albanian guy actually draws a gun and that Kavaja doesn't see, but it's later found on the floor. Kavaja is has his dagger ready there to stab him. And while getting ready to stab the guy, Austrian police comes and with their guns and arrests everyone. But the next thing it's Colonel Šića and Kavaja interrogating the Albanian guy.
Weird.
Yes.
Strange story.
Yeah, so they were arrested by the Austrian police, but then they're the ones interrogating the other guy who is arrested with them. I think it has something to do with Colonel Šića working for Austrian police and being a CIA guy.
That makes sense.
So, the guy says that he's Albanian and he tells them his name, but doesn't really says anything else. And, when they leave, Šića and Kavaja are talking, and Kavaja says that he's against when they find because in Kavaja's mind this guy is like a Titoist state security agent, and he tells to Šića I'm against your tactics. When we get these people, we should not give them to the Austrian police. We should just kill them.
Great. So he follows this dude around. This giant Chetnik-looking guy follows this Albanian dude into a jewelry shop where he's clearly hiding from Kavaja because some freak is following him around. He busts into the store and says to him,
"Do you understand or do you need an interpreter?"
Probably while fingering the hilt of his dagger. Let's be honest.
Yes.
Clearly this man needs to get got.
Yes.
Or maybe he was right. But who knows?
Yes, maybe he was right.
There's literally no way to tell at that point.
No. Especially because we were reading a book written by Kavaja.
Written by this, addled mind of this man.
Yes. So you remember when, I think it was our second arc, we talked a little bit about Yugoslav fascism, and we talked about a group called Orjuna that existed in Yugoslavia in the 1920s, which was a kind of a proto-fascist but Yugoslav nationalist organization that had lots of actually old Chetniks being a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a guy who was an important member of it called Dobrosav Jevđević. He is interesting because that guy used to be a member of Young Bosnia before the First World War. Okay. Was kind of a friend with Gavrilo Princip and that crowd. And then in 1920s he became a fascist, he was also a Chetnik in the Balkan Wars, and then became a Yugoslav fascist. And during the Second World War, he was nominally a part of the Chetniks of Draža Mihajlović, but he was really an Italian collaborationist. Mm-hmm. He was in Dalmatia, and he had this Chetnik detachment, which was officially called Voluntary Anti-Communist Militia by the Italian fascists. It was basically a part of their regime there. And then after the war, he stayed living in Rome and also worked for the CIA.
Yeah.
So, this guy
instrumental guide to getting a lot of Chetniks out into the U.S. and Canada, and did so by, and some of the really big names too, and did so by using his Italian/Croatian connects. So you had some of these Chetniks in these Franciscan monasteries that were run by Croats through this guy Chetnik Jevđević.
Yes.
Kind of.
So crazy. He's really kind of all over the place, from young Bosnian Gavrilo Princip to CIA and a Chetnik with Ustaša connections. And yes, I mean, we are maybe a too detailed kind of podcast, but it is kind of hard to cover all of these things without getting into details.
Yeah.
This guy is now visiting them in Salzburg. And this is a special event. And Kavaja tells us that, his handler, Colonel Šića, is a close associate of Jevđević. Mm-hmm. They're good buddies and work closely together, of course, because they both work for CIA. So there is a banquet for Jevđević coming in Salzburg, and it's held in the restaurant which is called Göring. So there's a Göring restaurant in Salzburg, which is maybe that's just a family that has that last name, which is not connected to Göring, but come on.
So now they were looking at a list of restaurants and they were like, didn't know what to pick. And they're like, Gurg, of course.
Was ist on die Hitlerburger?
Yes. This is a meeting place for these people. They are often in the Goering restaurant there. By the way, Kavaja is not like a pro-Nazi at this point. Like he's, at least the way he tells us, like he's like kind of also put off by some of Nazi stuff at the time. We heard in last premium episode that he kind of changed his opinions in his alcoholic later days. But at this point, he's kind of like what the fuck, Nazis? I mean, he's not clear very well. Like he's kind of confused by this. So Yevgevich is in this restaurant. He gives a speech. Everyone, is in awe of him. Kavaja too. The speech is something how, the communists are the worst enemy the Serbs ever had. There should be no compromise with them. We should just kill them and so on. And Kavaja actually talks with, Yevgevich, and Yevgevich gives him some advice. And this is something that stayed with him, for many decades.
Okay. What was the advice?
So I don't know. Something's dumb. I don't know. I didn't make any notes of it. I don't know. We should
drink more. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
To call him like macho is really a kind of an understatement. Like he's extremely patriarchal, and you will see this like in many occasions when he talks with women. He kind of clearly states the patriarchal norms of valuing a woman. Like often, he wouldn't like when he liked some girl. And then it was actually, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want to make a point. Like later on, he was in love with Ribalko's granddaughter, who was a grown woman, by the way, because he's an old guy.
Thank you for specifying.
So he was not a pedophile, at least according to Kavaja. But he didn't know how to talk to her, so he was telling her things like, well, I respect your grandfather very much, And he explained that he didn't know what else to tell her except that.
Smooth moves, man. He's got lines.
Things. So, it's... yeah. But he's also like, as I will later give you a little anecdote that he tells. He's also like, Kavaja is not...
Of like...
what?
Hey, are your legs tired? Because I respect your grandfather very much. Just mixing up these, did it hurt? Did what hurt? I respect your grandfather, I don't know. It's not really working here. But you get the idea. You got to take part of the pickup line and then replace the end of it with I respect your grandfather.
Yeah.
People can do their own work on that.
More on that.
I think I'm done. I gave it, that's out now. People can work on it themselves.
Yes. But Kavaja is also like I detect at least in this 1/3 of the book that I read, that he's not like a total misogynist. Like he definitely is like a uber macho guy from a very patriarchal and sexist culture and everything that comes with that. But he doesn't come off as like someone who has this kind of pathological hate of women or something like this. And he does actually kind of talk about some women in a kind of a very positive, the way that he can sense, and talks about their lives.
He likes their grandfathers.
So Mozart. You mentioned Mozart.
Yeah.
Get some class in here.
Or Wolfgang.
The second assignment that Kavaja got from Colonel Šića, his Serbian National Defense handler in Salzburg, was connected to the Mozart Festival, the annual Mozart Festival in Salzburg. So,
proper rager.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's either that or the Salt Fair. I mean, you can pick.
Yes. So they heard that some Yugoslav tourists are going to visit the festival with 3 buses. Okay. So they kind of, and you can't really argue with the analysis, they kind of figure out that, it's 1957, Yugoslav tourists going to Salzburg for the Mozart festival are probably some communists. That was their kind of...
Sure.
People who are connected to the new bureaucratic ruling class in Yugoslavia.
The red bourgeoisie.
Yes, the red bourgeoisie. So they will be there they are coming from Sarajevo, and they will be there with 3 buses. And your task, Kavaja, is to burn the buses. Destroy them. And Kavaja was supposed to, recruit someone else to help him, and all of these Serbian heroes and chetniks there, he recruited his Slovenian friend Victor to burn the buses with him. So the way they were supposed to do it was this, the style of terrorism that the Father Kavaja will perfect later on, which is getting a bunch of canister and filling them with gasoline, and then they, these buses were parked in some parking lot somewhere in the center of Salzburg, by the way. So they kind of secretly went to the buses and poured this gasoline all over them and started a fire and walked away. And while he was walking away, it was like a huge fire, and then he heard explosions. But there was like many more explosions than, just 3. So because many other buses that were parked right next to the Yugoslav buses.
I see.
Also,
so he blew up a whole parking lot.
Basically, yes. And he says,
undermines the message a bit. No?
Yes, he said, I kind of felt bad for that, but the fight against communism has its sacrifices, and these other buses and cars were part of our struggle, and so on.
Yes. My God, there's probably some poor Bavarian bus there. That's what did we do? Why?
Yes. So while in Salzburg, he gets to know people that he otherwise wouldn't, like lots of spies, for example, because he's recruited by Colonel Šića. So at one point he finds himself on a trip in a train with Colonel Šića and 2 other colonels who used to be a part of the monarchist Yugoslav army.
Okay,
different than Šića. They are traveling for an anti-communist meeting in Munich. And this is supposed to be an anti-communist meeting of Eastern Europeans, of nations occupied by the communism, let's say.
Okay.
That's the theme. And they're meeting in Munich for this anti-communist meeting.
But it's not the captive, the Association of Captive European Nations, is it?
It might be. We should check this out. So
there were also other similar, conceptually similar things going on at the same time period all over the place.
Well, I guess the only reason why it would be interesting is because Aachen would be directly related to the State Department. That's
right.
That's a deep state op. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure this is as well, because the 2 other colonels that are traveling with them are also working for the CIA.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So he's traveling there with 3 colonels of the Yugoslav army who all work for the CIA. So, but the other 2 are kind of different from Šića. This is like Colonels Dragiša Bojanić, I think, and Slavko Popović. Slavko Popović will be important for Kavaja's story. But they're different because they were not chetniks. They were one of these army Yugoslav officers who were in camps during the Second World War and then stayed in the West, never returned to Yugoslavia. And they were different from Šića because they were anti-communist for sure, very much so. But they were very pro-Yugoslav. They were not willing to give up on the concept of Yugoslavia, unlike Colonel Šića, who was very much against it. So this whole trip to Munich, the 3 colonels are arguing about that, and it's like a fight almost, like kind of a verbal fight between them, and Kavaja just sitting there and listening. And he agrees with Šića, he was indoctrinated by him, and so on. But the other ones are not only for Yugoslavia, but they think that Bulgaria should be a part of Yugoslavia as well. They want to make Yugoslavia even bigger. And they're saying things like, so many Serbs died for this ideal of Yugoslavia. I'm not gonna give it up and destroy it with this Šića guy, and so on. Also, during that trip, Slavko Popović, one of these pro-Yugoslav colonels, tries to recruit Kavaja to work for him, which later, after the trip, Kavaja will start also working for that guy as well.
All right.
Collecting intelligence, which I will tell you about. But so, they arrived to Munich, and so this is this, meeting. When they were just before they went there, Kavaja says that he asked Šića, Croatian, Ustašas, are they going to be a part of it? And Šića told him, no way, they won't be there. They're not interested in such things, and so on. There will be Ukrainians, Polish people, Bulgarians, and others, but Croatians, no. Which I found interesting because earlier I did find some like anti-communist, I think Ukrainian newspapers that wrote about these meetings, and it was clearly stated that both Serbs and Croatians were a part of them.
Yeah.
Maybe this was not that meeting, but I don't know.
I have a feeling that they were. I mean, they were usually at those things, especially in this time period. That's like something that they were emphasizing heavily on doing and organizing specifically with Slovaks and Ukrainians and Poles. And so like everybody else is there. I feel like Kavaja might have left that out because,
he might have blocked it out.
Yes. So the meeting is starting there, and it's held in a like Ukrainian house, let's say, Ukrainian center in Munich. Mm-hmm. And Kavaja is seeing a guy there, kind of looks familiar, and who's giving him like a bad vibe. He doesn't like him, and then he realizes, it's Stepan Bandera.
Hey.
So Bandera is in a meeting, and Kavaja is asking one of the Shicha, is that like Bandera? Like the Ukrainian guerrilla leader, and she just says, yeah, that's him. Like, he's a great guy, so on.
Oh yeah,
and
famously a great guy.
Yeah, and Kavaja was like, but wasn't he like a Nazi collaborator? And Shicha is like, so what do you care? Like, he killed so many Polish people, and look, Polacks are here. Like, they love him. Like, what's your problem with him? Like,
he's like, take a look around. We're all Nazi collaborators.
Yeah. It's like at the Liberty Lobby transformation. Yeah. When all the guys showed up to see swastika flags everywhere. Are we Nazis? Are we Nazis?
Are we the baddies?
Yes.
So this is like when Kavaja is realizing that they are the baddies. In fact.
Yeah. Shut up and drink your rakia from the skull mug I gave you.
Yeah. So basically, Shicha's argument is like, if the Poles don't mind him, like, what's your fucking problem with him? Mm-hmm. So they, at the end of the meeting, they write a statement together how they are all for a bunch of these, horrible people, and write a statement how they are like for democracy and human rights in Eastern Europe or something like this.
Okay.
And Kavaja is impressed how he says like this is like a great statement, but like. How can it reach the masses in Eastern Europe? Now this is
Radio Free Europe's like, we got it, buddy. Don't worry.
This is exactly what the answer is.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
No, that's what was my next line, because he says this is exactly, he says this to Colonel Shicha, and Shicha says this to him. That's why we have the Radio Free Europe for.
Yes, of course. Of course.
Yes, and the other thing he says, also Stepan, which that's how they call him. Mm-hmm. He also has like some liaison committees that he still has operating that are not found out by the KGB. So it's Bandera's network and Radio Free Europe that we have to reach the masses. And like Shicha says, Bandera did a great job. Like, he's a great guy.
It's a stand-up dude.
And you said this was in Munich?
Yes.
That makes sense. I mean, that's where Bandera lived until the end of his life. That makes sense.
So, okay, they're back home in Salzburg. Kavaja didn't like this other colonel, Slavko Popovic, the pro-Yugoslav anti-communist one who was there, but he started working for him. Also, the Russian colonel, the Cossack one, Rybalko, was not happy about this again, because he was this kind of protective figure to Kavaja, and he was not satisfied because he knew that this guy also works for the CIA, and he didn't want stupid Kavaja to get into trouble. And he was basically saying things to him like, why can't you just okay, you can be against the communists, but you really have to do this stuff with all of these people? Like, can't you just write an article or something like this?
Yes.
And Kavaja was like, no, I have to fight against the communists on something like this.
To be in your 20s again.
And Rybalko is like, oh, fuck, okay. So his task working for this Colonel Popovic was to basically interrogate. This is also what tells us what, people like Colonel Shicha did and that guy Vurdelja from Trieste, because Kavaja is basically getting that job now. For his CIA handler, basically his task is to interrogate all of the new coming immigrants from Yugoslavia and question them about everything. They have questions for them prepared, and write them down and deliver this to this Colonel Popovic, who works for the CIA. And what they're especially interested in is if they know, everything about the Yugoslav system, and especially if they know any of the names of people who work for the state security and the military counterintelligence of Yugoslavia. That was the most important thing. And Kavaja was very good for this job because he was himself a military officer, so he knew a lot about the system. It wasn't easy to lie to him and so on. And he loved this job. It was interesting for him, although it was very tiresome sometimes because he would interrogate sometimes 10 people per day who were ex-officers of the Yugoslav army and so on. But he got... while he started this job, he also got like permission from the Austrian police to travel all over Austria and Germany as well. So he was free to travel everywhere to do his job.
Okay.
There was a fun, violent story now. But so just before we get to the fun violence, so he's kind of now paternal figure of the Cossack Colonel Ribalko and his wife Anna, who's Serbian. They moved to America. And they kind of are sorry to leave Kavaja in Salzburg. Now they're almost like his kind of parents or something like this. They care about him, but they moved to America. But we'll meet them very soon again. In the fall of 1957, Kavaja was visited by an old friend who was from the same town in Kosovo where he was born, from Peć. And so this guy was also a military deserter called Spasoje. And before he deserted, he was a part of the Yugoslav United Nations detachment that was like a peacekeeping mission between Egypt and Israel in 1954. And after that, Spasoje escaped and went to the West and became a part of the French Foreign Legion.
Oh, interesting.
So in 1957, he's like on leave from the French Foreign Legion and he's visiting Kavaja. So they take this opportunity to have like a small vacation. So they go to an Austrian summer spot, some town, which is on a big lake. It's on the border of Austria and Switzerland. And it's a crowded tourist place. And they meet another friend there who's one of these Montenegrins who in the meantime settled there. So they are staying at this guy's house. So they are hanging out in a beach, which is very crowded. There's lots of people. And at some point, Spasoje comes to Kavaja and says like, "Oh, I saw some like Yugoslavs. It's like the fattest guy you ever saw." And they made a lot. They mentioned this lots of times. How incredibly fat this guy was.
All right.
And there is like an attractive blonde young woman next to him. For sure, not his wife. It's like some mistress of his. Like they conclude.
Okay.
And they speak in Serbo-Croatian. And for sure, these are like some fucking commies, they conclude. So they're like, let's beat them up. And Kavaja is even like, maybe we can kill them.
Jesus.
Yes.
I love how like their first instinctive impressions are totally enough to commit to like some sort of extreme violence.
Yes. Okay, they did some scouting, so they walk around and they found a black Mercedes with Yugoslav plates, and they conclude, okay, that's their. They actually, I think, saw them driving the car or something like this. Okay, they have money. They're from Yugoslavia. It's 1957, whatever, And they actually they use this language of people who were kind of criticizing the Yugoslav system from the left, He calls them bureaucrats and such things, which is not like what Chetniks use as terminology to criticize the Yugoslav system.
Well, we know that that Gilas was circulated heavily in these circles.
Yes,
I actually just saw Gilas in an Ustasha paper published in Chicago from this time period too. Yeah, so they were all reading that as well.
Yeah, Gilas, of course, is the Yugoslav communist dissident who was imprisoned because he developed this kind of critique of the Yugoslav system as a kind of a new class system where the ruling class is the bureaucratic class, popularly known as the red bourgeoisie.
It's just so annoying that people that really, really, really want a detached ruling class would use that as a criticism. But there you go.
Yeah. So they followed this couple around, this tourist place in Austria. They locate the house in which these people stay. They rented a house apparently, and then they follow them. Okay, this is now probably what he made up. They follow them to a restaurant, and so they kind of somehow overhear their conversation while this incredibly fat guy that he points out all the time, the fattest person ever that ever lived, is eating like a pile of Viennese schnitzels there and something like this. And they have a conversation about how, so the guy is called Božo and the woman is called Milka. So Božo and Milka have a conversation and they'll say like, well, it's our time to enjoy ourselves. We fought in the war against those bastards, you know, the traitors and the Nazis and so on, and now we should enjoy ourselves. And Kavaja kind of hears that after Austria, they're planning to visit Switzerland and so on. So they go back to the house while they're still not there. And so it's Spasoje, his French Legion friend, and him, and the other guy is waiting them in his house. He's not part of the action. So they go, Kavaja uses his trusting dagger to open the window. They sneak into the house while it's empty. So Spasoje, his friend, he hides in the closet, and Kavaja hides under the bed. And so at some point,
can you clarify how big Kavaja is? Because in my head, he's quite big. Is he? But if he can squeeze under a bed in the 50s, I mean,
I don't know.
I guess he's fairly compact.
I actually don't know. Yes. He does make a joke like, oh, I was afraid if the fat guy lays on a bed, I will die or something like this. And so Milka and Božo come to the apartment at some point. Of course, the Božo goes straight to the toilet to shit, and he's like there for half an hour. And Milka's walking around the flat, and then at some point she goes to the kitchen, and while she's in the kitchen, Kavaja quickly sneaks out of the bed and unscrews the light bulb in the sleeping room, the bedroom. And then she comes back and says, "Oh, the light is dead or something."
Yeah.
And so Božo shouts from the toilet like, "Unscrew the light bulb from the kitchen and put it in the bedroom." And she does that. So now they're in total darkness. There's no light in the apartment. And when she walks into the bedroom, Kavaja, goes out of the bed, and he has a bat, by the way.
Damn.
He smacks Milka on the head with this bat.
Oh, damn.
Knocks her unconscious immediately. Božo hears like from the toilet something is going on, and he's like, "Oh, you can't even like change a light bulb without falling down," and so on. So he gets out of the toilet, and Kavaja smacks him with the bat, knocks him unconscious. And after that, they leave. That's what he told us. He kind of gave up on this idea of killing them. So they leave. He doesn't say if they stole anything. I kind of think they did. So they go to their friend's apartment, and like they hear sirens. It's like emergency cops and so on. And tomorrow, the Austrian newspaper says it says Yugoslav terrorists attacked and so on. But Kavaja tells us that later on he heard how Božo was actually a manager of the Rade Končar electrical company from Zagreb, and how he was a big shot and so on. I was kind of looking for managers, and I found one of Rade Končar manager who was called Božo, but he worked in the 50s there, but he was not a manager in the 50s. He became a manager in the 80s, and he was not fat at all. So I don't know. Maybe he made up this, or
it's a weird story in a lot of ways. Like, why would he give up on the idea of killing them then? I mean, he's got his knife. He went through all this trouble, snuck into their room.
Yes.
They're both, prone.
I think the other guys were not for killing. Like, he had trouble even persuading Spasoje even to do this,
This basic thing here. Okay.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes. So he's psycho, I would say.
Well, yes.
Yeah. So they go back to Salzburg. By the way, Kavaja meets the Yugoslav exiled king Peter II in Salzburg.
Oh, damn.
So the Serbian National Defense organizes a meeting there in the honor of the king when he visits, and Kavaja is in charge of security for the exiled king. And he even chats with the king, and the king's kind of impressed by him. I
bet he is.
That's what he tells us, and so on.
Yeah.
Is
that like how Mussolini was impressed by Ezra Pound? Like,
yes,
Mussolini nodded at him once.
I think exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So Kavaja tells us, I don't know anyone of who makes mistakes on purpose, but some things I did in my life seem like they were mistakes I made on purpose. And one of these mistakes was my first marriage. And so he married like this person that he says it's German. I'm not sure if she's Austrian. I think he calls Austrians Germans, which is, I think, proper and correct.
Yeah. Fun way to fuck with them, too.
He married this German person called Maria Moser that he divorced some years later, but he had a daughter with Elizabeth.
Whose son was Bill Moser, FBI special agent in charge of Temple of Blood.
Well, yeah, that's
wouldn't that be great?
Well, Maria later lived in Canada, by the way.
Oh shit!
So
getting closer.
Yes. But he said, like, okay, this marriage was in trouble because he had his obligations for the CIA at the time. Now we are like in 58, 59, and these years, which was the first years of their marriage, Kavaja spent in Algeria. And he doesn't tell us what he did there, but he says that he did stuff for the CIA.
Yeah.
Doesn't spend at all any time explaining what the fuck he was doing there. And then when he came back after 2 years in Algeria, he spent almost a year in Chile.
Okay.
This was like in 1960, I think. But he liked his father-in-law very much, this German guy, the father of Maria. So the father-in-law had 3 sons who died in the Second World War fighting for Germany. But he had his daughter and also 3 other sons. And Kavaja spent a lot of times with him. And so he says, like, when we discussed Second World War, my father-in-law was very discreet. But then he says, this escalates pretty quickly. Then he says, like many Germans I knew, he had nice things to say about Hitler. And then Kavaja says, well, I asked him, like, but what about these millions of people that Hitler killed? And the father-in-law says, like, oh, you mean the Jews? Well, they made it up. Like, the Jews made that up, you know. And then also, not only that, but like this Feldmarschall, like a Nazi Feldmarschall Kesselring is visiting their home. And Kavaja meets that guy as well. And then also he tells us that how the father-in-law personally knew Hitler because they were from the same town in Austria.
Damn.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, yes. So Kavaja wanted to move to America. And in 1961, he applied for like immigration. And actually, he didn't do that himself. His Serbian guys, who I guess were CIA, kind of did that for him. And they gave him all the documents that he needs to. And they told him, okay, now you have a meeting with immigration in Vienna with the Americans and you should go there. And he did. And he had like a long conversation with them, and he was supposed to write his biography for the last 9 years, which took him 2 hours to do so.
Okay.
And after the long conversation, they told him, "Okay, you're in. You're great. You're going to America. No problem." So at this time, his marriage was falling apart. He applied for like divorce when he was in America, but in effect, the marriage was over. And he says something like, well, it was too bad, but I had to do what I had to do. I felt sorry for my daughter. And she later lived in Vancouver, and she was a journalist, and she even wrote an article about me when I was arrested for the hijacking or something like this.
Wild.
But that's what he tells us about his family. So when he had this conversation in Vienna, after it was over, they told him, like, all we now need is a guarantee from your Serbian organization in America, and you're good to go. And so the guarantee was a guy from Patterson, New Jersey, called Tika Topalovic, who was also a former Chetnik and vice president of the Serbian National Defense of all America. And he was his guarantor that he can go and he will have a place to stay somewhere in America. So he flew, when he was on a plane to fly to America, it was full of Eastern Europeans, many Polish people, and they were all, it seems, a part of the same program. By the way, Kavaja flew with a gun. Like, he had a gun on him in a plane, which was like that he didn't hide or anything. Like, he just had a gun on him.
It was the 60s.
Yeah.
Airport security basically.
And he also worked for the CIA. Yeah.
And he worked for the CIA.
so at some point, just before they landed in New York, the second pilot gave like envelopes, sealed envelopes to everyone in the plane, all these Eastern Europeans. And he told them, you should give this to some immigration officers when you land. But Kavaja said, like, okay, they didn't tell me that I shouldn't open the envelope, so he opened it. And he saw his like files in there and like military files, his biography and everything. And he saw like photos of him that the Yugoslav army made that he knew about, but he didn't possess and never gave to the Americans, but they somehow had it.
Okay.
So they had some other source on him beside himself. By the way, the fact that then when he opened the envelope, all the Polish guys in the plane started opening their envelopes as well, and which was a problem when they landed, and they were like, the immigration officers like, why the fuck did you open all of this? And Kavaja was like, well, they didn't tell me not to open it. So,
it's all it takes. It's a chain reaction.
Yes. So, but that was fine. He met this Tika Topalovic guy who drove him like to Paterson, New Jersey, where he lived, which is a big downfall for that place.
I was just thinking that.
Yes, a home for many migrant anarchists in America, and now it's a home for Nikola
Italian ones specifically.
Yeah. So when Kavaja moves to Paterson, he's very pleased to know that the Cossack Colonel Rybalko is living there, and that he's basically his neighbor. So he kind of reunites with him and his wife Anna, and he starts living. He moves out of the Tika's place, and he lives with this Colonel Rybalko, who's like happy to have him there. And he is connected now with, of course, against the Serbian National Defense Organization. He attends their congresses and meets, he networks and meets lots of influential Serbs there. In 1962, he attends the Chicago Congress of the Serbian National Defense, and he meets Bishop Dionisia there, who we mentioned like
many times now.
A lot in this arc, who's kind of very important for this arc. Kavaja is his friend from this point on. They're pretty close, at least according to Kavaja's opinion. And Dionisia, he lives in Paterson, but Dionisia wants him to live in Chicago, and he does that. He moves on Dionisia's suggestion. He moves to Chicago, although his initial host Tika is not satisfied with this. He wants him in New York. He says like, we all need like good Serbs in New York. Everyone is going to Chicago, like that's too bad. And when he goes to New York, he becomes friends with Dragiša Kašiković. That's the guy who's soon to be the martyr of the Serbian anti-communist cause. He's the one who was brutally killed by the Yugoslav state security, together with his stepdaughter, kind of stabbed dozens and dozens of times. We talked about this before. And also this guy, Miomir Mile Radovanović, who we also mentioned, who was later on one of the founders of SOPO and friend of Father Kajević. So they are this Miomir, Dragiša Kašiković, soon to be martyr, and Kavaja are kind of the militant trio or a troika, let's say, in New York at the time. Like the kind of the cutting edge of Serbian militant anti-communism. And then on Dionisia's suggestion, they all move to Chicago together.
Okay.
And are closely tied to the Serbian National Defense in Chicago. Dragiša Kašiković even lives on the premises of it, which is where he will be later killed, like in the headquarters of the Serbian National Defense there. But they all hang out all the time there. But they kind of start their own kind of groups, more militant ones. And Kavaja says that as a part of the Serbian National Defense in Chicago, they start kind of a youth section, was more militant, had like 40 members, and which was called Gavrilo Princip.
Okay.
And it was kind of directed by the three of them. They have shooting ranges in the cellar of the headquarters of the Serbian National Defense, as well on the premises of the monastery of Bishop Dionisia in Libertyville. So they train there.
Good old America. They couldn't do that in fucking Europe.
No. So they train there. They are ready to fight, against communism. At some point, there are some Yugoslav graffiti appears in one of their churches in Chicago, which is against pro-communist, anti-fascist graffiti. They get really pissed off, so they organize a large demonstration. in New York in front of the consulate of Yugoslavia there. And they are joined by some American conservatives, which are led by a woman from Texas called Marsha Smith, who is like a close friend of theirs. She will appear later on a little bit.
Interesting.
By the way, yeah. So the day after this the demonstration, 2 bombs were exploded in the consulate.
Damn.
Wow. Okay.
So this troika that I mentioned, Kavaja, Dragiša, and Miomir, they're also, according to Kavaja, instrumental in the schism that happened in the Serbian church, because they had a meeting with young Serbs and they decided they need to put some pressure on Bishop Dionysie to kind of cut his allegiance to the Serbian church, which was headquartered still in Yugoslavia, because they thought it's under communist control and so on. So later on, the 3 of them have the meeting with Bishop Dionysie and kind of persuade him to cut ties with the church in Yugoslavia, according to Kavaja.
Right.
Which then, after this meeting, Bishop Dionysie accepts. Of course, we mentioned before, that prior to this cutting of ties, Bishop Dionysie was kind of demoted by the church in Belgrade because they said that he had like a lover or something like this, which was not allowed because he was supposed to be in celibacy. And so that this was basically kind of an excuse afterwards, this schism.
Yeah.
So soon enough, this troika of these 3 militant guys, they start this what they call a hunt for Tito. They want to kill Tito. By the way, Dragiša Kašiković was active in U.S. military for many years. He left the military in 1960. He was a citizen of of course, and he was stationed with the U.S. military in Asia and Europe, but left it in 1960. And of course, all of them had CIA connections, which I'll talk about soon. And I think these attempts to kill Tito were not sanctioned by CIA. I think it's quite obvious. And they seem like kind of half-assed attempts, like kind of like what we covered with Father Kajević. Again, it seems like almost like they were kind of going through the motions without really actually wanting to assassinate Tito.
Do you guys ever feel like we're just going through the motions?
Yeah.
Do we even want this?
So, okay, we are now in 1963. We are approaching the end of this episode, very close. So they want to kill Tito, okay. So Dragiša Kašiković tells to Kavaja, go get that thing from the cellar of the Serbian National Defense, like there's like a big cart there with some documents and weapons. Get there, we're going to Libertyville. And they arrive there and they meet Bishop Dionysie around midnight, and they go to the church in front of the bishop and the altar. They have an oath, and the oath is that they are now on a mission to kill Tito, because Tito is having a tour in Latin America and then the States as well. Okay. So they travel to Mexico to kill Tito. This is the idea. It's pretty ridiculous. So Dragiša Kašiković goes first. He can travel without problems because he's a U.S. citizen. And then after he's going to the Mexico City to scout out the area, and see where Tito will be and so on. So after that, he meets the two other guys. But by the way, it's not this time. It's not this Miomir Troika part. It's the third guy on this mission is a guy who they call Ljubiša the Serb. So Ljubiša the Serb and Kavaja, they meet with Dragiša, who is going now from Mexico to Texas to meet them in El Paso. The 3 of them meet there.
All right.
Before they go to Mexico, and Dragiša meets them there, and Kavaja says, dressed as a Mexican. He even has a sombrero.
No. This is like Pierce and the Turner Diaries and
the Order. Yeah.
Frijoli. Hasta la vista.
He blended in Mexico City with his sombrero.
Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Yes. So they meet there, and then they go to Mexico. So the other 2 guys are not citizens. They can't really legally cross the border. Ljubiša the Serb has a green card. Kavaja doesn't, but he has a fake U.S. passport. But they scout out, and they know that there is a bus that goes across the border that's usually full of U.S. and Mexican military and police and like border guys, and the control is not like almost existent. So they go on this bus hoping that no one will check them, and it through. No one checks them. They just cross the border into Mexico. Eventually, they go to Mexico City, but before they go there, just when they cross the border, like their experienced friend Dragisha, they also buy Mexican clothes and sombreros. So they are now completely blending into Mexico City. These 3 Serbian guys with sombreros.
Who are probably significantly taller than everyone because they're like Montenegrin. The Serbs are like the tallest people in Europe, literally, just with fucking sombreros on.
Yes, in Mexico City, which probably doesn't make any sense.
¿Dónde está Tito? Tito, mi tío.
Okay, so this is like a big failure. I don't even know what to say about this. Okay, so they think they know there is some villa that Tito wants to be in, but it's surrounded by the military. So they decide, okay, we're just gonna shoot him when he rides in his car. But Tito has like 100 Yugoslav agents and then 100 Mexicans on motorcycles around him. So there is no chance of them killing him at all. Like, it's too fast, too crowded. Ljubiša the Serb actually has a camera that they put a gun in, but it's no use. They're not able to do anything. So they know, okay, Tito will go to the States after that, so we should go there and try to kill him there. So they do that. By the way, they cross the border illegally. They find a guide who guides them across Rio Grande, and Ljubiša the Serbs falls into Rio Grande. But okay, they somehow managed to reach DC after that.
God, the road trips these guys go on to try to kill Tito. I mean, it's really the journey that counts, though.
Yeah, clearly,
not the destination.
So, of course, when they are in DC, they go to a Serbian old restaurant or a kafana to regroup there and get drunk. And, of course, like in Father Kavic episodes, everyone knows they're about to want to kill Tito in the Serbian community. And also the FBI also knows and is looking for them actively all over the place. They hear about it. And, so it's a clown show. So they hear that Tito in America, he will stay in Williamsburg, which is, I guess, a town called Williamsburg.
Yeah.
Or the neighborhood could be.
It's not New York. It's like
It's like a colonial Williamsburg. That's a thing.
Yeah, I guess.
He just says Williamsburg. Doesn't explain what state or anything. So they go there. It's full of the feds are everywhere, and they found a house which has an American and Yugoslav flag on it, and they think, okay, Tito will stay there. But Tito, just 3 helicopters appear and land in a yard of the house, which is anyway surrounded by the military and police. There's no way they can kill him. And then some days later, the 3 helicopters just go away from the town, and that was that.
I'm sorry.
That's what happened there.
I'm picturing them as they're going through these efforts to kill Tito, them just loading up the car with souvenirs. In the back now they have sombreros and a guitarron, and now they went to colonial Williamsburg and they got some local honey, and maybe some furniture.
One of those stupid tricone hats or whatever.
Yes, they got tricone hats to blend in.
It's fucking powdered wig or some shit.
They're all dressed like George Washington. Yes.
So, okay, Tito is obviously not anymore in the town, but they decide, okay, there are still Yugoslav flags here. Let's stay on until the Yugoslav flags are gone. And then the Yugoslav flags are just gone, and they're like, oh, fuck, Tito is not coming back to Williamsburg. So they're like, okay, if we didn't manage to kill him, next stop is DC. He's going to see the president, which is Kennedy. We have no chance of killing him there, so let's not go there. But after that, he's going to New York City, so maybe we should go there. By that time, Ljubiša the Serb is out. He's fuck this, I'm going back to Chicago. So Miomir comes from Chicago to be the third guy, and they go to New York. And so, okay, Tito is staying at the Astoria Hotel. It's another disaster. There's no way they could kill him. It's very crowded. They're basically crushed by the masses there. Almost the masses crush them to the facade of the hotel. And Miomir is has the gun camera, and he's kind of trying to point it at Tito's car, but it's too fast. It's so crowded. It's like a disaster. They do nothing. They're pathetic. So after,
is this like when he says gun camera? Is this like a film camera? Like, is it? You know what I mean? Like, will it bash him in the face with the kickback, or is it like
I don't know? He says they had
a video camera where he holds.
They converted the camera into a gun somehow. I don't know how they did that, but
all right.
I'd imagine it's one of those really, really tiny handguns that's very difficult to kill people with. It's wildly inaccurate and have very low caliber.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, these people also work for the CIA, so I guess they had some gadgets.
That's true. They might have had some fun gadgets, like little smoke bombs instead of buttons, and laser pens.
So after this humiliation and not being able to kill Tito, Kavaja was like, okay, I want to kill an Ustasha at least. So
at least,
so he wanted to kill Andrei Artukovic, one of the very kind of important high-ups.
That's a much better target.
Who lived in California at the time, but he didn't know where he lived. But there was a contact, like a Serb from Herzegovina who lived in LA, who Bishop Dionysia knew, and who knew where Andrei Artukovic lived. But when it was time for him to tell him where this guy lived, he wouldn't. And Kavaja didn't know why is this guy not telling him. So there was something suspicious about these LA Serbs and their connections with Ustashas, it seems. But he went to LA anyway, trying to find out where Artukovic lived. He went there with a Serbian actor who wanted to make it in Hollywood. But the actor didn't know that Kavaja is carrying, lots of weapons on this travel. So he went there and was kind of walking around, I guess, California, trying to figure out where Andrei Artukovic lives. And he did find out completely by accident, he tells us. Because he was not able to find out, and then he met some family there. And while at a family house, like an old friend from Salzburg, from one of the camps, a Serbian guy, came to visit him. And after that, he said, hey, we should go. And the friend said, we should visit my cousin here. She's married to some guy here in California. But the guy is Croatian. He's some doctor, some Croatian guy. So I know, let's go there. He's a nice guy, but don't make trouble. I know that you don't like Croatians. And so on the way there, he says, and also, please, don't make any problems. Sometimes in their house, Andrei Artukovic visits.
Oh, shit.
And Kavaja is like, what the fuck are you saying to me? Your cousin who is a Serb, okay, she's married to a Croat, but her regular house guest is this Andrei Artukovic. Are you crazy? What's going on with you? And so on. And this friend says well, yeah, but she criticizes him. She tells him
oh yeah,
what you did to Serbs, it was very bad. But Andrea says something well, listen, I didn't. It's truly horrible. I didn't know anything about it. It was these other idiots who did all of that stuff and so on.
Of course.
So
it was a different time.
Yeah. So Kavaja is very mad at his friend and his cousin and what the fuck is going on here. But he stops being mad and he realizes, okay, this is very fortunate. I want to kill this guy. Now I actually know someone who knows where this guy hangs out and actually lives. The guy knows where Andrei Artukovic lives. And not only that, he's kind of dating Artukovic's daughter, Vishnya. So this Serbian guy is dating Artukovic's daughter, whose name is Vishnya, which is, I think, also the name of Ante Pavelic.
Ante Pavelic's daughter, yeah.
I don't know what's the Ustashas and Vishnyas, but yeah. So he's very disappointed in LA Serbs, but now he knows where Andrei Artukovic lives. But he says, okay, clearly LA Serbs were not ready to do anything about Pavelic, so he goes back to Chicago and picks up Ljubisha the Serb, and two of them go to LA to kill Artukovic.
God, he's been all over the country. He's done the Great American Road Trip at least 3 or 4 times at this point.
So they scout out the area.
It's a good thing, by the way, that actor friend of his didn't try to do a selfie with that camera. That would have been awkward. It wasn't a thing yet.
So Artukovic doesn't have one house. He has 2 houses next to each other. They are both furnished, but the other one is not used. And Kavaja says, I guess it's for his Ustasha guests or something like this. So he lives there with his, I think, 3 daughters and a wife. And so Kavaja is okay, no. So Ljubisha the Serb makes sense. He's we should just go into the house and fucking kill him. That's the plan. And Kavaja is no.
Sure.
We should go to the other house next to his house and wait for for a good opportunity when he's alone. And so Ljubisha the Serb okay.
In the annex of St. Jerome, they call it.
Yeah. So they go to this house and they spend like 3 nights there in the house.
Damn.
Waiting for Artukovic to be alone, which it never happens. This guy's never alone. And after 3 nights, Vishnya spots Ljubisha the Serb smoking at night. So, Ljubisha the Serb runs down the stairway, and he's like, "Oh, they saw me. What the fuck are we going to do now?" So there's an alarm on the Artukovic, estate. There's lots of noise and so on. So they bust out of this house and they actually, with guns, and they go into the house where Artukovic is, but they can't find anyone. So they escape and then they are arrested.
Total chaos.
And there is a trial actually, but they are like, it was determined they are like innocent or something like this. He never went to prison. But yeah, total failure. Like, Ljubisha the Serb was like, okay, we should just go there and kill him. And he was like, no.
Yeah, it would have been the easiest possible target at that point.
Yes.
And they couldn't do it.
And, for once, a target I think we can all get behind.
Absolutely.
Oh,
really.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Artukovic, by the way, lived completely openly. I mean, the U.S. government refused to extradite him until, like, the 80s, at which point he was, like, literally, like, falling apart and 100 years old or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yay.
So, okay, this is the end now, I promise. We're now in 1967, and I will end this episode when Kavaja tells us that SOPO was founded. And he kind of tells us this very, very briefly. He doesn't mention Father Kajevic. He will mention him later. At this point, he doesn't, and which is a kind of a diss, I would say, because according to Father Kajevic, he was given this task in Paris and went to America and started the organization. And Kavaja tells a different story. Deliberately, he says there was this meeting when we kind of united in 1967, and after that we did the bombing campaign. They bombed many consulates and embassies of Yugoslavia in Northern America on the same night at the same time. And he says I was a part of that action and so on. But SOPO existed before that, and he says our friend Miomir. He started SOPO in 1961, but he's very confused about this. But then he also says SOPO also existed as a legal group, as a part of the Serbian National Defense in the early 60s. Then there was also a group which was called the Black Hand in Chicago, which was a part of the Serbian National Defense, which was like a militant group, and I was a part of it. All of this happened, before 1967 when Father Kajevic went to America, but all of these groups kind of united then in 1967. This is what happened, or kind of got more structure or something like this. But I found it interesting that he mentioned that he was a part of the group called the Black Hand, which was a part of the Serbian National Defense. Yeah, it is. In the 60s.
Well, I guess he called his training group like Gavril Princip or something too,
yes,
right?
Probably, yeah. He says that this was like a part of the Serbian National Defense in Chicago. As the last thing, I would like to mention that he, in this same kind of, on the same page where he tells us these things about the founding of SOPO in 1967, he says, I want to say something. It's completely untrue that any police agency started 1967. Like, these rumors are untrue that some people in the Serbian diaspora say that it was founded by UDBA or like the Yugoslav State Security. Not true. And then he says, also it is important to say that all of the actions that we did, were they like against the Yugoslav communists or the Cuban communists or the American communists, they were all sanctioned by the CIA. We never did anything that was not sanctioned by the CIA. And he says, I personally was a part of 29 actions, and only one of them was not sanctioned by the CIA. 28 of them were.
Was that the Tito hunt? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know what he means by that. But like, I guess he means SOPO actions. I don't know if that was maybe pre-SOPO. Right. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah. But he says that's what he thinks it's important for us to know at this point.
I'd say it's pretty important. Yeah.
So that's that. Yeah.
All right.
So
damn.
Yeah.
Man,
we kind of finished there
got the tails.
Yeah. So I think this kind of confirms kind of my hunch from before, about the Serbian National Defense, the connection with the earlier history, at least how they see it.
Sure. Yeah.
And the Black Hand, and the fact that he says that he was a part of some new Black Hand, and also the CIA connection.
Yeah.
And the CIA connection here is really interesting to me. It's one of those things that we won't know ever about for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I can totally believe it. I'm interested in where like the Cubans factor in, since you mentioned that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also very curious about Algeria, but that's kind of a whole different story because I happen to just also be reading about some Croats that are in Algeria and writing about Algeria at the same time. So it's kind of...
Yeah. I think we'll learn more about some of these things in the future episodes, but not all of them, because clearly he just kept his 2 years and 1 year in Algeria and 1 year in Chile, where he did stuff for the CIA. He just doesn't write about it at all. Which is interesting because he writes about very bizarre things, but somehow decided that he doesn't want to write about it.
Some of the stuff is just too crazy.
Yes.
I mean, it's not hiding under somebody's bed to beat them with a baseball bat. This is
we will kind of learn a bit in the premium episode. We'll learn about why he's not saying some of the things.
All right.
I think he was basically an assassin.
Did you just say the sentence? In the previous episode, we will learn?
Sorry, yes.
Is it because we haven't recorded yet? Yeah, okay. You're giving away you're showing them how we make the sausage again.
Yes, we heard about this in our previous premium episode.
We are time travelers. It is part of the benefit of living down here. All right. Well, great. Really strange story.
Craziness.
And we're just now, I mean, this is still just the beginning of this guy's tale.
Yeah, so wait, this is 67. We still got Kavaja's Summer of Love Adventure.
Holy shit. Yeah. Wow.
By the way, when they were like getting ready to kill Tito, they heard that Kennedy was shot. I don't know when exactly what attempt was this, but one of these that I talked about, and Kavaja was like, good. And like that guy is like a worse enemy of ours than Tito is, because he's a friend of Tito and he gives money to Tito and so on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, guys, we have to end this episode.
Yes. All right.
If you want anything left after I cut it. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, then see you next time. We'll have to continue this in the Patreon, I guess.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Cool.
Later.
See you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.